following content examines a real criminal case involving violence and loss of life. Out of respect for the victims and their families, viewer discretion is strongly advised.
This is the Channel 2 News Late Edition.
Good evening, everyone. The massive search for missing barista Samantha Koenig is over, but it's not the news family and friends were hoping for. Anchorage police announced today they found a body they believe to be Samantha Koenig's in Meticulously Lake out in the valley.
February 1st, 2012, 8 p.m. A coffee stand in Anchorage, Alaska. An 18-year-old barista looks up from her work. A man approaches the window. He orders an Americano. She smiles, makes his drink, hands it to him. Then something changes. In the surveillance footage, you can see it. Her body language shifts. The smile disappears. Within 60 seconds, they're both gone. Within 18 hours, she'll be dead. But here's what nobody knew that night. The man at the window wasn't just a kidnapper. He wasn't just a murderer. He was something much worse. This is the story of the girl who became a serial killer's final mistake. And when I say serial killer, I don't mean someone who killed 2 or 3 people. I mean someone investigators believe murdered 11 people across America over more than a decade. Someone who buried weapons in the ground years before he'd used them. Someone who traveled thousands of miles to select victims he'd never met. They've only identified 3 of those 11 victims. But before I show you the surveillance footage that captured evil in real time, before I reveal how a father's desperate attempt to save his daughter accidentally funded a killer's escape, before I tell you about what they found in his jail cell after he died, you need to understand something. This case almost never got solved, because the man who took that girl made almost no mistakes for over a decade. He was careful, calculated, meticulous, but on that February night he made 3 critical errors. And one of those errors was captured on camera. I'm about to show you how one abduction exposed a killer who studied Ted Bundy like a textbook, who called other serial killers wimps for getting caught, who told FBI agents he would have kept killing forever if he hadn't made one stupid mistake. This is the story of Samantha Koenig, the 18-year-old who fought back, who tried to run, who gave investigators the clues they needed to uncover one of the most terrifying serial killers in American history. But there's a twist in this case that nobody saw coming. Not the FBI, not the prosecutors, not even the victim's family. A twist that means 8 families still don't know their loved ones are dead. Welcome to True Crime Mind Studio. Tonight we explore a horror so sinister, it's etched in your memory forever. If you're ready to dive deep into cases that expose the darkest corners of human deception, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, share this video, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from and if you've heard of this case before. Now, let's get into it. But before I show you what that surveillance camera captured, before I reveal the 3 critical mistakes that ended his killing spree, you need to know who Samantha Koenig really was. Because what she did in her final hours wasn't just brave. It was the reason investigators eventually caught him. And the reason they discovered he'd been killing for over a decade. Anchorage, Alaska. Population about 300,000. It's the largest city in Alaska, but it still has that small-town feel where people know their neighbors and trust the community. Winter nights are long and cold, but Alaskans are tough. They take care of each other. Samantha Tesla Koenig was born on August 30th, 1993. She was 18 years old in the winter of 2012, young, hardworking, full of life. She attended West High School and Avail High School in Anchorage. She worked multiple jobs, balancing school and work with the kind of determination that impressed everyone who knew her. Her father, James Koenig, had an extraordinarily close bond with Samantha. From the moment she was born, they were inseparable. Hunting trips, camping adventures, just spending time together, they were like 2 peas in a pod. Samantha was her father's companion, his pride and joy. She also had a close relationship with her sister, Kaylee Christensen, and a boyfriend named Dwayne Tortolani too. They'd been together for 9 months. Dwayne would pick her up after her late shifts at the coffee stand. It was routine. It was safe. Or so they thought. In February 2012, Samantha was working at a small drive-through coffee stand called Common Grounds Espresso on Tudor Road. It was a simple job: serve coffee, chat with regulars, close up at 8 p.m. The kind of job thousands of young people work while figuring out their future. Samantha's favorite color was lime green. She was described by friends as good-hearted, bright, someone who could light up a room. She had dreams, plans, a whole life ahead of her. But on the night of February 1st, 2012, all of that would end. Because someone had been watching her. Someone had been planning. Someone who selected that specific coffee stand for a very specific reason. And here's what makes this even more chilling. The man who was watching Samantha? He'd been practicing for this moment for over a decade. He'd already killed multiple people. He'd perfected his technique. He'd learned from other serial killers' mistakes. And on February 1st, he was finally ready to execute what he thought was the perfect crime. Except he was about to make 3 mistakes. Mistakes that would unravel everything. Israel Keyes was 34 years old in February 2012. To anyone who knew him, he seemed completely normal. He ran a small construction business in Anchorage called Keyes Construction. He had a girlfriend and a young daughter who lived with him in a modest house. He was quiet, polite, hardworking. The kind of guy you'd hire to fix your roof and never think about again. But Israel Keyes had a secret. He'd been living a double life for over a decade. And nobody, not his girlfriend, not his employees, not his neighbors, had any idea what he really was. Keyes wasn't just a killer. He was a predator who had turned murder into a twisted science. He didn't stalk specific victims. He didn't have a type. He selected targets completely at random, people who happened to cross his path at the wrong time in the wrong place. But the randomness was calculated. Keyes planned his crimes with terrifying precision. He would travel hundreds or thousands of miles from his home in Alaska. He would bury kill caches, plastic containers filled with weapons, zip ties, duct tape, in remote locations years before he'd return to use them. He financed these trips by working construction and robbing banks. He studied other serial killers. He knew every detail of Ted Bundy's crimes, Robert Hanson's methods, the BTK killer's mistakes. He told investigators he admired killers that haven't been caught. He called Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, a wimp for apologizing in court. He's enjoyed what he did. He told FBI agents that killing gave him a thrill nothing else could match. He had no remorse, no conscience, no empathy, and he would have continued indefinitely if he hadn't made 3 critical mistakes on the night of February 1st, 2012. The first mistake, he chose a victim too close to home. The second mistake, there were surveillance cameras. The third mistake, he got greedy. And that greed would lead to one of the most bizarre and disturbing ransom schemes in FBI history. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, you need to see what happened at that coffee stand. Because what the surveillance camera captured that night wasn't just an abduction. It was a master criminal making his first fatal mistake. And he didn't even know it. The timestamp reads 7:55 p.m. The camera angle is fixed. And for the next 67 minutes, you're going to watch a serial killer execute what he thinks is the perfect crime. Except there's one problem. Something he doesn't realize until it's too late. Something that will lead investigators directly to his door. But we'll get to that. First, let me show you what happened in those 67 minutes. What I'm about to describe happened in less than 1 hour. 1 hour captured on surveillance footage that would become some of the most chilling evidence the FBI has ever analyzed. But here's what makes this footage so disturbing. You can see the exact moment Samantha realizes she's in danger. You can see her body language change. You can watch evil unfold in real time. Israel Keyes had been watching Samantha for weeks. He'd driven by Common Grounds multiple times, studying the location. He knew the coffee stand closed at 8 p.m. He knew a young woman worked there alone during closing. He knew her boyfriend would often pick her up after her shift. He'd seen this pattern repeat night after night. Keyes had considered other coffee stands in Anchorage, but he chose Common Grounds for specific reasons. Its location on a busy road gave him an escape route, and it stayed open later than others, meaning fewer potential witnesses when he made his move. On the evening of February 1st, 2012, Keyes began his final preparations. He removed the toolboxes from his white pickup truck. He took off the license plates. He parked the truck across Tudor Road from the coffee stand, in the lot between an IHOP restaurant and a Dairy Queen. Then he walked across the street. At approximately 7:55 p.m., Israel Keyes approached the Common Grounds espresso window. Samantha was working alone, finishing up her shift. She was expecting her boyfriend Dwayne to arrive soon to pick her up. Keyes ordered an Americano. Samantha made the drink, just like she'd made hundreds of others that day. She handed it to him through the window, and that's when surveillance footage captures the moment everything changed. You can see Samantha's body language shift. She goes from someone casually serving coffee to someone who's suddenly very nervous, very concerned. Her demeanor changes completely in a matter of seconds. What the camera can't show is what Keyes did next. But we know from his confession, he pulled out a gun. He pointed it at Samantha through the window and demanded money from the till. Samantha put her hands up. She backed away from the window. Then Keyes made a demand that revealed his true intent. He told Samantha to turn off the lights inside the coffee stand. She did. The surveillance footage shows Keyes moving around to the side of the kiosk, climbing through the window into the small structure. Inside, out of view of the main cameras, he bound Samantha's wrists with zip ties. Then he forced her to walk out of the coffee stand with him. The footage shows them walking westward toward the Denali Street crosswalk. Keyes has his arm around Samantha, and to anyone driving by on busy Tudor Road, it might have looked like a couple taking a walk. But Samantha knew the truth. She was being kidnapped. And then she did something incredibly brave. Samantha broke away. She tried to run. Keyes chased her down within seconds. He tackled her to the ground on Tudor Road, one of Anchorage's busiest streets. He put his arm around her neck and pressed the gun into her ribs. "The gun has very quiet ammo," he told her. "Don't do anything to make me kill you." Remarkably, despite this violent struggle happening along a busy road, nobody reported seeing anything strange. Nobody called 911. Nobody intervened. Keyes forced Samantha across the street to his white pickup truck. He put her inside, bound and terrified. At 8:02 p.m., just 7 minutes after approaching the window, Israel Keyes drove away with Samantha Koenig. But he wasn't done at the crime scene yet. And what he did next shows just how brazen and calculating he was. As Keyes drove around Anchorage with Samantha bound in his truck, explaining to her that this was a kidnapping for ransom, he realized he'd forgotten something critical. Samantha's cell phone. He needed that phone to send ransom demands. Without it, his plan wouldn't work. So Keyes did something that still shocks investigators. He drove back to Common Grounds at approximately 10:30 p.m., 2.5 hours after the abduction, with Samantha still in his truck. Wearing a headlamp, he forced his way back into the coffee stand and retrieved Samantha's phone and the zip tie pieces he'd left behind. The surveillance footage captures this return. It shows Keyes inside the small kiosk, cleaning up evidence. And here's the detail that haunts everyone who's seen this footage. Just 4 minutes after Keyes left the second time, Samantha's boyfriend Dwayne arrived at the coffee stand to pick her up. For minutes. If Dwayne had arrived even slightly earlier, he might have encountered Keyes. He might have saved Samantha, or he might have become another victim. But Dwayne arrived to find the coffee stand empty, the lights off, and his girlfriend gone. Keyes drove to another part of Anchorage. Using Samantha's phone, he sent 2 text messages impersonating her. One went to Dwayne. "Just had a bad day. Going away for the weekend." Then Keyes forced Samantha to tell him where she lived and give him the PIN to her ATM card. Samantha told him she shared a bank account with her boyfriend, and that the ATM card was in the truck they shared. Keyes drove to Samantha's house to retrieve the card. While he was there, something happened that could have changed everything. Dwayne came outside and confronted him. Dwayne yelled at the stranger in his driveway. Then he ran back inside to get help. But Keyes was faster. He jumped in his truck and sped away before anyone could stop him or get a good description. Keyes drove to an ATM to test the PIN Samantha had given him. It worked. Then he drove to his house, the house where he lived with his girlfriend and young daughter. And he took Samantha to a shed in his front yard. What happened in that shed over the next few hours is almost too disturbing to describe. But you need to hear it, because Samantha's final act of courage, something she said, something she did, would later give investigators a crucial piece of evidence. Evidence that would help them understand they weren't dealing with just a kidnapper. They were dealing with someone who'd done this before, many times before. Inside that shed, Israel Keyes bound Samantha, turned up the radio to drown out any sounds, and told her he had a police scanner and would know if she tried to alert the neighbors. Then he went inside to his girlfriend and daughter. And according to his later confession, he sexually assaulted and strangled Samantha Koenig to death in that shed, while his family slept just feet away. It was early morning on February 2, 2012, less than 18 hours after her abduction. Samantha had tried to talk to Keyes during her captivity. She tried to convince him to let her go. She told him her family didn't have much money for ransom. She cooperated, believing that cooperation might save her life. But Israel Keyes never intended to let her go. After murdering Samantha, Keyes left her body in the shed. Then he did something that reveals just how cold and calculated he was. He went on a family vacation. The very next day, February 3rd, Keyes drove to the airport with his girlfriend and daughter. They flew to New Orleans and boarded a pre-planned 2-week cruise in the Gulf of Mexico. For 2 weeks, while Samantha's family frantically searched for her, while volunteers distributed flyers all over Anchorage, while her father James appeared at press conferences begging for her safe return, Israel Keyes was on a cruise ship, relaxing, enjoying family time, monitoring news coverage of Samantha's disappearance on his laptop. And when he returned to Anchorage on February 19th, he was going to do something that would shock even seasoned FBI investigators. He was going to stage a photograph that would haunt everyone who saw it. A photograph so disturbing, so calculated, that it would become one of the most infamous pieces of evidence in serial killer history. But I'm not going to tell you about that photograph yet. Because first, you need to understand what was happening in Anchorage while Keyes was on vacation. You need to know about a father's desperate decision. A decision that would save the investigation, but destroy him in the process. Because James Koenig was about to do something that every parent would do to save their child. He was going to raise money, a lot of money, and he was going to put it exactly where the kidnapper wanted it. But here's what James didn't know, what nobody knew, what would make this one of the most heartbreaking twists in true crime history. The person he was trying to save had been dead the entire time. $70,000. That's how much the community raised to bring Samantha home. $70,000 that went into her bank account. And every single cent was about to fund a serial killer's cross-country escape. But the FBI was watching. And what happened next would turn this from a local kidnapping case into a multi-state manhunt that would expose one of the most prolific killers in American history. While Israel Keyes was cruising the Gulf of Mexico, Anchorage was in crisis. And what happened next would set off a chain of events that nobody could have predicted. Because Samantha's father was about to make a decision that would save the investigation, but in the most heartbreaking way possible. Samantha's father, James Koenig, knew immediately something was terribly wrong. When Dwayne called him that night to say Samantha was missing from the coffee stand, James knew his daughter wouldn't just vanish. She was responsible, dedicated. She would never abandon her shift or worry her family. Within hours of Samantha's disappearance, James and the community mobilized. They organized search parties. They distributed missing person flyers all over Anchorage. They set up a reward fund. And the community responded with incredible generosity. Friends, neighbors, even strangers donated money. By mid-February, the reward fund had grown to over $12,000, with more donations coming in daily. Volunteers gave out lime green ribbons, Samantha's favorite color, in exchange for donations. James Koenig held press conferences, pleading for his daughter's safe return. "We need to find her as soon as possible," he told reporters. The desperation in his voice was palpable. Police reviewed the surveillance footage from common grounds and immediately knew this was an abduction. They could see the man approaching the window, see Samantha's body language change, see the lights go out, and see them walking away together. But they couldn't identify the man. and they couldn't find Samantha. For 2 weeks, the search continued. Volunteers searched parks, trails, roads. Police followed every lead. Then Israel Keyes returned from his vacation. On February 19, 2012, Keyes went back to his shed, back to Samantha's body. And he did something that still disturbs investigators to this day. He sexually assaulted her corpse. Then he took Samantha's body, applied makeup to her face, and used fishing line to sew her eyes open. He positioned her to appear alive and placed a copy of the Anchorage Daily News from February 13th, 4 days old, next to her. He took a Polaroid photograph. Stop and think about what I just told you. Keyes posed a corpse to look alive. He sewed her eyes open with fishing line. He positioned her body. He held up a newspaper. And he took a photo designed to convince everyone she was still breathing. This photo would become one of the most infamous pieces of evidence in FBI history. But here's what nobody realized when they first saw it. Here's the detail that would later make investigators sick. The photo wasn't taken in some remote location. It was taken in Keyes' shed, while his girlfriend and daughter were inside the house, less than 20 feet away. In the photo, his arm is visible holding the newspaper. Samantha appears to be alive, her eyes open, looking at the camera. But she'd been dead for over 2 weeks. This is the photograph that would become infamous. The proof-of-life photo that was actually a photograph of a corpse posed to look alive. Keyes then dismembered Samantha's body and drove to Matinuska Lake, about 40 miles north of Anchorage. He cut a hole in the frozen lake, under the guise of ice fishing, and disposed of Samantha's remains in one of the deepest parts of the lake. And when FBI agents asked him later, "Did you catch any fish while you were there?" Keyes replied, "Yeah, I caught a fish. I took them home and ate them." With the body disposed of, Keyes was ready to execute the final phase of his plan. Ransom. Using Samantha's cell phone, Keyes sent a text message directing police to Connors Bog Park, to a location under Albert, a memorial flyer for a dog. Under that flyer, police found a ransom note demanding $30,000 to be deposited into Samantha's bank account. The note contained the Polaroid photo. To investigators and the family, the photo looked like proof Samantha was still alive. Her eyes were open. She appeared conscious. The newspaper was recent. This meant there was still hope, still time to save her. James Koenig did what any father would do. He put the reward money, now over $70,000 thanks to generous community donations, into Samantha's bank account. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. Samantha had been dead the entire time. The community had raised money to save her. James had deposited that money believing it would bring his daughter home. But all they'd done was fund a serial killer's escape. On February 24th, Keyes rented a white Ford Focus and began a massive road trip. He drove that car 2,847 miles through multiple states, making ATM withdrawals along the way with Samantha's card. Each withdrawal was captured on ATM cameras, and each withdrawal showed the same thing, a white Ford Focus in the background. The FBI and Anchorage police were tracking these withdrawals in real time. They issued alerts to law enforcement agencies across the Southwest. White Ford Focus, Texas plates, person of interest in a kidnapping case. But Keyes kept driving, kept withdrawing money, apparently believing he was outsmarting investigators. He wasn't. And on March 13, 2012, in a small town in Texas, a highway patrol officer was about to make a routine traffic stop that would crack open one of the most disturbing serial killer cases in American history. Texas Highway Patrol Corporal Brian Henry was on patrol in Lufkin, Texas, when he spotted a white Ford Focus matching the description from the FBI alert. The vehicle was parked at a hotel. Henry waited for the driver to emerge. When a man got into the car and began driving, Henry followed at a distance. He waited until the vehicle exceeded the speed limit, just slightly, and then pulled it over. The driver was Israel Keyes. During the search of the vehicle, investigators found Samantha's ATM card, her cell phone, and the disguise visible in the ATM surveillance footage. Israel Keyes was arrested, but investigators had no idea what they'd really caught. Not yet, because when they started asking Keyes about Samantha Koenig, When they showed him the evidence, when they looked him in the eye and told him they knew he'd kidnapped her, he started talking. And he didn't stop for 8 months. What came out of those interrogations would shock even the most seasoned FBI agents. Because Samantha wasn't his first victim. She wasn't his second or third. She was victim number 11. At least that's what they believe. And here's where this case takes its darkest turn. A turn that even the FBI didn't see coming. Keyes told investigators something that made their blood run cold. He said he'd been killing for over a decade, traveling thousands of miles, burying weapons years before he'd use them. And here's the part that still haunts them. He told them about something he'd buried near his victims' homes. Something he called kill caches, murder kits, hidden across America, waiting. Some of them are still out there, right now. But that's not even the worst part. Because when Keyes died in his cell 9 months later, he left behind a message, written in his own blood. And what that message revealed would change everything investigators thought they knew about this case. 11 skulls. That's what they found under his bed. 11 human skulls painted in his own blood. Not drawn, painted, carefully, deliberately, each one a face, each one a victim. The FBI believes those 11 skulls represent 11 people Israel Keyes murdered. They've identified 3. That means 8 victims are still out there. Unknown, unfound. Their families don't even know they're dead. But before Keyes painted those skulls, before he took his own life, he sat in an interrogation room for 8 months and told investigators things that would rewrite everything they knew about serial killers. This is what he said. Keyes was extradited back to Alaska. And in an interrogation room at the FBI's Anchorage field office, special agents began questioning him. At first, Keyes denied everything. But investigators had the evidence. They showed him the surveillance footage, the ATM withdrawals, the items found in his car. "We know you kidnapped Samantha Koenig," they told him. "We're going to convict you." And that's when Israel Keyes made a decision that would expose one of the most prolific serial killers in modern American history. He confessed, not just to kidnapping Samantha, not just to murdering her. He confessed to being a serial killer who'd been operating for over a decade. And what he told FBI agents would become some of the most chilling interrogation footage ever recorded. Over the next 8 months, in more than 40 hours of recorded interviews, Israel Keyes walked investigators through a decade of murder. He admitted to murdering Samantha Koenig. He described every detail. The surveillance of the coffee stand, the abduction, taking her to his shed, sexually assaulting her, strangling her to death. He described going on vacation with his family while her body remained in his shed. He explained how he created the fake proof-of-life photo by sewing her eyes open. And then Keyes told investigators where to find Samantha's body. On April 2, 2012, FBI dive teams searched Matinuska Lake. They recovered Samantha Koenig's remains. For James Koenig and his family, it was devastating confirmation. But at least they could bring her home. At least they could lay her to rest. But investigators were realizing something terrifying. Because Keyes kept talking. He admitted to murdering a couple in Essex, Vermont in June 2011. Bill and Lorraine Currier, ages 50 and 55. Keyes broke into their home, found them, drove them to an abandoned farmhouse, shot Bill, and sexually assaulted and strangled Lorraine. And here's where investigators' blood ran cold. Keyes revealed that 2 years before the murders, in 2009, he had buried a murder kit near the Kayas' home in Vermont. Let me repeat that because it's important. 2 years before the murders, he buried weapons near their house in 2009. Then he went back to Alaska, lived his normal life, worked construction, played with his daughter. And in 2011, he flew back to Vermont, dug up those weapons, and used them to kill Bill and Lorraine Currier. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This wasn't even premeditation as we normally understand it. This was premeditation across years, across thousands of miles. This was planning that would make any investigator's blood freeze. Because if he did this once, how many other kill caches did he bury? And how many of them did he actually use? The kit contained weapons, zip ties, duct tape, everything he'd need to commit a murder. He buried it, marked the location, and then waited 2 years before returning to Vermont to kill. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't crimes of passion. This was premeditation on a level FBI agents had never seen before. The FBI later found that cache in Parishville, New York, where Keyes had moved it after the Courier murders. It was a Home Depot bucket filled with weapons and tools, buried in remote woods. Keyes told investigators he had buried up to 12 of these kill caches across the United States. Think about that. 12 plastic buckets filled with murder weapons, buried in forests, parks, and remote locations across America. Some buried years before he'd returned to use them. He admitted to killing people in Washington state while he lived there from 2001 to 2007. He said he killed 4 people, including disposing of at least one body in Lake Crescent by weighing it down with anchors and dumping it in more than 100 feet of water. He admitted to killing someone in upstate New York in April 2009. He admitted to robbing multiple banks to finance his killing sprees. He admitted to burglarizing 30 homes across the country. And he hinted at many more victims he refused to name. Special Agent Jolene Godin described what it was like interviewing him. You could be in a room with him and it was like you were in the room with your neighbor. And then there were other times where the hair on the back of your neck stands up. Keyes showed no remorse. In fact, he seemed energized when describing his crimes. His body would shake with excitement. He'd rub his arms on the chair rests so vigorously that his handcuffs scraped the wood finish off. Once I started, there was nothing else like it, he told investigators. He explained that he studied other serial killers extensively. He knew their methods, their mistakes. When asked about Alaska-based serial killer Robert Hansen, Keyes replied enthusiastically, "Yeah, I know all about him. I probably know every single serial killer that's ever been written about. It's kind of a hobby of mine." He called it a hobby. Studying serial killers was a hobby. Keyes told investigators he chose victims completely at random. Parks, campgrounds, hiking trails, isolated locations where he could abduct people without witnesses. Not as much to choose from, he told investigators. But there's also no witnesses, really. He admitted he enjoyed what he did. He told agents if he hadn't been caught, he would have continued kidnapping and murdering people indefinitely. But there was one thing Keyes did care about, his daughter. He told investigators he wanted to avoid publicity because of the negative attention his young daughter might face. He wanted to be executed within a year so his daughter wouldn't have to grow up knowing the details of what he'd done. He negotiated with prosecutors. He'd give them information about other victims if they agreed to certain conditions. Death penalty, quick execution, no public release of details that would hurt his daughter. Prosecutors were willing to negotiate. They wanted to identify those other victims. They wanted to give closure to families. But Israel Keyes never gave them that chance. And what happened next, what they found in his jail cell, would reveal the true scope of his crimes in the most disturbing way possible. On December 1, 2012, while awaiting trial in the Anchorage Correctional Complex, Keyes managed to obtain a razor blade. Using that blade, he cut himself and bled to death. But before he died, he created something that haunts investigators to this day. Prison officials found sheets of paper under his bed. On those papers, painted in his own blood, were 11 human skulls. 11 faces looking back at them. And written at the bottom, also in blood, "We are one." The FBI believes those 11 skulls represent 11 victims. They've only identified 3, Samantha Koenig, Bill Courier, and Lorraine Courier. 8 victims remain unknown. 8 families who don't know their loved ones are dead. 8 people whose remains have never been found. And here's the plot twist that nobody, not the FBI, not the prosecutors, not the victims' families, saw coming. When Keyes died, he took all the answers with him. The locations of the bodies, the identities of the victims, the dates of the murders, the states where they occurred. All of it died with him in that jail cell. And now, more than a decade later, the FBI is still searching. Still trying to identify those 8 unknown victims. Still trying to give closure to families who may not even know they need it. Because somewhere out there, 8 families are wondering what happened to someone they love. 8 families who have no idea their loved one crossed paths with Israel Keyes. And that's the most disturbing part of this entire case. But the story doesn't end with Key's death. It doesn't end with those 8 unknown victims. Because what happened after Keyes died changed how law enforcement investigates serial killers. It changed how the FBI approaches cold cases. And it changed one father's life forever. James Koenig lost his daughter. But what he did next turned that grief into something that's saving lives right now. And the FBI? They're still following leads. Still investigating. Still finding new evidence more than a decade later. Because those kill caches Keyes buried? They're still out there. And one of them might be in your town. Right now, as you're watching this, there are FBI agents working on the Israel Keyes case. Analyzing DNA. Following up on tips. Investigating cold cases in states Keyes visited. Because every unsolved disappearance from 2001 to 2012 is now a potential Keyes victim. Every missing person from Washington, Vermont, New York, Alaska, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, anywhere Keyes traveled, could be victim number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 11. The FBI has created a timeline, a map, a detailed record of everywhere Keyes went for 15 years. And they're asking for your help. Because you might know something. You might remember something. You might be the person who finally identifies one of those 8 unknown victims. More than a decade has passed since Israel Keyes took his own life. But for the FBI, for Samantha Koenig's family, and for the families of unknown victims, the investigation isn't over. It may never be over. The FBI has released thousands of pages of documents, hundreds of hours of interview recordings, and an interactive map showing Keyes' travels from 1997 to 2012. They've held press conferences. They've asked for the public's help. If we have a missing person identified in a particular area, we work closely with that local police department to either connect the person to Keyes or not, Special Agent Godin explained. We have his DNA. They're using that DNA to test against evidence in unsolved murders across the country. They're investigating cold cases in every state Keyes visited. But it's a painstaking process. Keyes was meticulous about covering his tracks. He rarely left evidence behind. He disposed of bodies in remote locations or in deep water where they'd never be found. Special Agent Catherine Nelson, who has taken over the investigation, remains determined. It won't be easy by any means, and it may take a long time, she said. But I'll never give up trying. The FBI has identified one possible 4th victim, Deborah Feldman, a 49-year-old woman who disappeared from New Jersey in April 2009. Keyes admitted to killing someone on the East Coast around that time, but they haven't confirmed it yet. Some investigations have focused on Julie Marie Harris, a 12-year-old girl who disappeared in Colville, Washington, in 1996. Keyes lived in the area and was questioned about her case, but he never confirmed or denied involvement. The Boca Killer crimes in Florida in 2007. Multiple unsolved murders in Washington state. For families of missing people across America, Keyes' crimes raise a terrible question. Could my loved one be one of his victims? The FBI has a message for anyone who might find a kill cache. Do not touch it. Call 1-800-CALL-FBI immediately. For Samantha Koenig's family, the years since her murder have been a journey through grief and toward purpose. James Koenig was devastated by the loss of his daughter. We deserved our day in court and we didn't get it, he said after Keyes' suicide. But James didn't let his grief consume him. He created a non-profit organization called Seeking Alaska's Missing. The organization works to raise awareness about cold cases and missing persons in Alaska. Through this work, James has helped other families navigate the same nightmare he experienced. He's kept Samantha's memory alive by helping others. Samantha's sister, Kaylee Christensen, has also remained active in advocacy work. She regularly organizes fundraisers for missing persons organizations. At Matanuska Lake, where Samantha's body was recovered, there's now a memorial plaque dedicated to Samantha Koenig and all of Israel Keyes' victims, known and unknown. This case is about them and their lives and the lives that they have not been able to live, Special Agent Godin said. Israel Keyes wanted to be remembered as the smartest serial killer who ever lived. Someone more calculated than Bundy, more careful than BTK, more successful than any killer in history. But in the end, he made the same mistake they all make. He got cocky. He got greedy. He killed too close to home. Samantha Koenig's abduction happened in his own city. The surveillance cameras captured his face. Using her ATM card across multiple states left a digital trail. And when that Texas Highway Patrol officer pulled him over, his decade-long killing spree came to an end. The 11 skulls drawn in blood remain one of the most haunting pieces of evidence in FBI history. 11 lives taken, 8 still unidentified. But here's what Israel Keyes got wrong about everything. He thought he'd be remembered as the most meticulous serial killer of the 21st century. He thought his name would go down in history alongside the killers he studied. But that's not what happened. Today, when people talk about this case, they don't talk about Israel Keyes first. They talk about Samantha Koenig, the 18-year-old who fought back, who tried to run, whose courage in her final hours gave investigators the clues they needed. They talk about James Koenig, who turned his grief into action and now helps other families find their missing loved ones. They talk about a community in Anchorage that came together to search for a girl they'd never met. And they talk about 8 families still waiting for answers. The investigation continues. The FBI hasn't given up. And neither has Samantha's family. In memory of Samantha Tesla Koenig, August 30th, 1993 to February 2nd, 2012. And all the unknown victims of Israel Keyes who deserve to be found and brought home. If you have any information about Israel Keyes travels or potential victims, contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or visit fbi.gov/tips, because 8 families are still waiting, still hoping, still searching for someone they love.